Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Monsters. And today I have Sarah Flagg, and she is a family therapist and she's also an education specialist. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yes, and just so you know, it's Sarah Marie now. It used to be Sarah Flagg. It's now Sarah Marie, which is actually,
Oh,
I'm so glad that you said that because now I can let the world know as well.
let
It's just Sarah
everyone
Marie.
know.
I just like my first and middle name, and then that just has been how it's flowed for me in my life now that my co-parent and I are co-parents. I don't like to
Okay.
tack that that
Right.
to any part of my business or my story.
Right, right. Well, that's one I'm so excited like for you to tell your story. I know it's not wonderful for you, but what you have been through and where you are now, I just can't wait for people to hear it. So
Thank
it'll
you.
give so many people hope.
Thank you. I really am scared to share this story because it's unconventional. It's one
Mm-hmm.
that um, some people might have a hard time believing, and I'm not here to make any believers. I'm here to speak to the people who are like me, who
Mm-hmm.
need new systems. And
Mm-hmm.
this is really my first time telling my story in its
Really?
entirety. Yes. So
Oh,
thank you for
okay.
giving me this platform. I love what you're doing, and I am so grateful to be here.
Well, you can't go wrong with you're speaking your truth,
Yeah, that's how I
you know?
feel.
And you know what? If people don't like it, just move along.
Yep, turn my
But
pain
there's gonna
into purpose. That's what I'm doing.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. All right, I'll let you dive in.
Okay, yeah. So my story really starts in a small community with a population of about 500 people in Northern California. And it was the type of place where everyone knew everyone, and you really would think it would be like the picture perfect place to raise a family. And beneath that small town charm, there was actually a little bit more complex reality. In such a small space, secrets couldn't always stay secrets, and
Hmm.
sometimes when the secrets surfaced, they were covered up by those in power. And that's when I realized at a very young age that, okay, living in this town, if something difficult happens to me and I speak up, me or someone else, and I speak up, you are quickly the problem. And I witnessed this firsthand when someone I loved was taken advantage by someone in power. I
Okay.
witnessed an entire system protect the perpetrator instead of seek justice for the victim.
Okay.
And seeing that really left me feeling unsafe and vulnerable at such a young age. But I
So it
want
was
to, oh,
putting a lot of fear into everyone.
right, especially if you were young, right?
Right.
And I want
Right.
to be really clear because this isn't about me trying to blame a specific town or group or a person. I think this is actually happening in a lot of small town, close-knit communities, and people who live in these can relate that sometimes silence is expected to keep the peace. But
Mm-hmm.
that truth is the silence sometimes is protecting the wrong people.
Right.
And so, although I don't want to go after one person, I want to highlight the fact that in small towns, this is happening. This pattern is happening of silencing in order to conform. So, really unable to process this harm that I witnessed, I felt completely unsafe. I disconnected from the parts of me that felt unsafe, and this manifested into physical elements such as
And how old were
anxiety.
you? Sorry, how old were you now?
So
Right.
when the trauma happened to the person I love, I was around 4 or 5. When the symptoms surfaced from the disconnection from the parts of myself, I was 9 or 10, and that looked like just I was able to. My poor mother, bless her heart, I was able to throw up on command pretty much because I was so anxious to go to school all the time and to be around the adults, and
Okay.
I really just felt so unsafe. It just manifested as different pains and anxieties, and I was around 9 or 10 at that age.
So
So,
young.
so young. So, unfortunately, that pain followed me into my teenage years. This is where I went into complete survival. I like to call myself the most rebellion teen I've ever worked with because my symptoms came up as rebellion. And even working as a school counselor, I still have not met someone who has rebelled at the level I was as a teen.
Okay.
In addition to that rebellion, though, came an eating disorder and addiction.
Okay.
So by the time I'm 16 or 17, I'm fully addicted to drugs, have a full blown eating disorder. And I was aware that these parts of me were not normal because I remember sitting like in my high school class, psychology class, and reading, like, I am these symptoms. I am this book. How do I tell people? How do I ask help? But I chose to hide those parts because I felt like they were so broken and like something was so wrong with me.
So
But
if you don't mind, Sarah, can you share like what those symptoms are? What were you experiencing? Just because, as we know, with trauma, there's so many other people out there that are
Mhm,
going through the same thing right
mhm,
now.
mhm.
And maybe if you describe it a little, just so people know like how
Absolutely.
deep this was.
Absolutely. So for me, this looked like being addicted to Oxycontin and heroin by age 15 or 14. I'm a
Okay.
little gappy on my years and timeline because of dissociation. It also looked like being bulimic, so binge eating and throwing up in silence around my family, who wasn't really there physically, but there, you know, as much as they could be. I
Right.
mean, they were there
Right.
physically, but not emotionally.
Right. Right.
And so um, it looked like me binge eating. It looked like me not only using, but dealing drugs. It looked like anxiety attacks, depression. I remember waking up, going to school, barely making it through school, coming home, sleeping almost 14 to 16 hours a day from maybe my senior year in high school because by that point I had already realized, like, oh, I can't use drug to cope. I can't. So my body started coping in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so broken. But like now looking back, I realize I wasn't broken. Those were my younger selves parts trying to protect me. Like my
Yes.
rebellious self, that was my fight response, trying to take back my power. And my
100%.
addiction is like how I numbed the extreme pain I was in that I couldn't cope with.
How did you get introduced to drugs without saying names?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, mhm.
Because you were young.
So I was living in a situation where my physical needs were met, but my emotional were not because of how much was on my family's plate at the time. So
Okay.
I pretty much was a teen that had free reign to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. It was just, I was checked in on, are you alive? Are you good? Type of
Right.
thing. Sorry, we're surviving. It was no one's fault. It was just, we were dealing with a lot of trauma.
And they were
And
dealing the best they could.
exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone was
Yeah.
just doing the best that they could. And the people that took interest to me and the way that I felt connection because I wasn't feeling it at home was on the streets.
Right.
Because people who don't have a ton of physical, like, money, house, they don't have all these things. They're forced to learn to connect. They're
Right.
forced to learn to come together to group. And so when I felt disconnection at my home, I went to the streets because that's where I felt like my people were.
Right.
I
And
didn't
they
need,
understood you.
right.
They,
They were
right.
there if I was happy or sad or whatever. They didn't care about what image I was putting on for the public or anything like that. And so
Right.
I was introduced to drugs based on where I felt connection. And the
Okay.
people that gave me attention at that time introduced me to Oxycontin and
Okay.
drugs. And I didn't even know that I was actually using heroin until I got in trouble and a cop told me that's what it was. I thought it was
Wow.
opium. So I had adults lying to me and having me sell for them. And I had a big system of support that is not supportive at a young age.
Right.
But
Right.
that was just due to not having support at home and me thinking that that was connection.
Right.
So I was introduced that way, and
Which is all too normal,
hmm
unfortunately.
And it's very confusing for people when they hear my story because on the surface, it's every need was met, right? I had the house, I had nice clothes, but for me, my trauma is what wasn't done for me. It's who wasn't there when I was crying. It's the pictures I don't have of graduating high school after overcoming addiction and an eating disorder and everything else. It's all the things I didn't have happen. It's the people that weren't around when I needed them. And so that's why trauma can be confusing to people because it's not always just physically what's happening to you, it can be what's not happening to you as
Right.
well.
Right.
And I understand now, that even my eating disorder was just a way of myself protecting or trying to create control in what like a world that I felt chaotic. But
Right.
I want to be like super clear. I don't want to villainize any part of my past because if someone's listening who's currently struggling with self-harm or an eating disorder or addiction, like I want them to know this. Like you're not broken. You're literally you're not broken. I know you feel broken.
Right.
But these aren't failures, these are survival mechanisms.
Yes.
And there's tools with the right tools you can heal. And so that's like when I share my story, it's like, yes, it's dark. And yes, I have to take accountability for things that I did when I was younger, trauma or not, right?
Right.
Trauma induced
Right.
or not, I have to take accountability for those. But at
Absolutely.
the same time, I understand like their survival mechanisms, and I am living proof that you can heal.
Right. Right.
So my story kind of continues out of high school where I hit rock bottom. And
Okay.
rock bottom for me looked like waking up in a Scientology rehab with absolutely no memory of how I got there. And so, what that felt like in my shoes was literally opening up my eyes one day and being in a house with complete strangers and not knowing why I was there or what happened. And so,
Okay.
I went and asked the people around me, like, why am I here? What's happening? And I was met with, well, you're a meth addict. And when you come out of denial, we'll be able to work with you. And at the time, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, when I was a teen, I used, but never that. And I don't even know anyone that has meth. So, like, something's not adding up, but I can't remember why I got here. And I'm so sick that I have to stay here because I need help. And
So
so
you don't even remember like the events that got you
I
there,
remember bits
or
of it. I remember my family giving me a medication and then putting me in the back of a car. I remember stopping at a location and seeing Subway. So it's very dissociated. And then I
sure.
remember yelling when I got to the rehab, like telling my family, this is not help for me. Like you're abandoning me. And then I woke up. And and this Scientology rehab was run by former addicts with little to no medical oversight. And I did see a doctor for about 15 minutes who deemed me healthy enough to endure the program. And to give you just a little snippet of this program, I sat in a sauna for 5 hours a day for 45 days straight while taking high doses of niacin to purify myself and the drugs I'd taken. Unfortunately for me, this is not the system I needed because I wasn't using meth and or drugs and or if that's even healthy, I don't know because I'm not that type of doctor. But
Right.
for me, the daily purification process looked like me vomiting for 45 days straight in silence and secret so that they could see I was purified to move to the next level of the rehab, which then included me touching walls for 8 hours a day for weeks at a time to stay in the present moment. Um, and that looks literally like someone, give you an example. It literally looks like someone standing next to you and saying, go touch that wall. And you go over and you touch it. And then they say, now go touch that wall. And you go over and touch the next wall. And then they say, now go touch that wall. And you do that all day long until you're in the present moment. And so it was very clear to me that I
It's like they
needed.
were trying to break you, not heal you.
Yeah, yeah.
God.
What was so funny though is that even though this was not the system I needed to heal, the people in the system that were there working there saved me. They literally saved my life because they didn't know what was happening with me either, but neither did my family. No one knew what was happening. But my family had no solution, so they sent me here, and they were just trying to help me the best they could. So they did save me in their own way. They were just doing what was taught to them. It's just
Right.
unfortunate that that system is not the one that I needed.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I do also want to acknowledge that I know people who have gone through this same system and found complete healing in this unconventional program and other ones like it. And I totally respect that. But it was not safe or effective for me. And that's kind of what I want to highlight, is that sometimes not all systems are safe and effective for everyone in every
Right.
situation. And what I needed was mental health care, and I didn't get that until much later.
Okay.
And so I graduated this program after 3 months. I think I saw my son, who was 4 at the time, twice. And a year later, I spiraled again. But this time I had a lot more awareness of what was happening. I could
Mm-hmm.
tell I was missing days and time. I could tell it was something in my mind because I couldn't discern what was real versus my manifestations of my mind. And so at that time, I really begged the people around me to take me to a hospital this time instead of trying something more unconventional. Like,
Were you medicated at all at this time? Okay.
no, nope.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So, and this was the reason I was sent to the Scientology rehab was because my family did not want me to be put on medication,
Okay.
because they viewed that as like maybe making me a vegetable or not who I
Right.
really am, right? And they just
Right.
had
Right.
societal fears about it, essentially, which is totally normal with anyone who's having
Sure.
mental health symptoms. You don't know how they're going to end up. It's scary because it's
Right.
not the same person, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I basically begged to go to a mental health facility, and in between my dissociation, I was experiencing psychosis, and
Okay.
my co-parent did get me into a mental health facility. Within like 20 or 30 minutes of being there, they were able to diagnose me and get me on medication. They gave me a shot, if I remember right. And I remember on the way home, it was the first time I felt normal in maybe my entire life.
Wow.
And that was really where my healing journey like started, because I got a diagnosis and I started to discover tools that would help me rewire my mind and start healing.
Do you remember what your psychosis was like? Like, can you describe it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So psychosis to me feels like channeling. Have you ever heard of channeling?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it feels just like I am tuning into energies that people cannot see with their physical eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like I can feel like the waves off of like the internet, like I can see that, and then I can
Right.
like feel spirits. And I even at one point, um, in my early 20s, ran a business where I was a channel, and
Okay.
I was, you know, connecting to spirits, which also is a symptom of mental health, but I didn't know at that time.
Right.
So the symptoms for me look like, honestly, walking into a room and seeing a lot of dead people. And it doesn't look like seeing it with my eyes. Like, it's not scary like that. It's
Right.
actually in my imagination. So if I were to like hold my hand up and you stare at my hand for like 5 minutes and then close your eyes, you can still see my hand in your imagination.
Okay.
So if I walk into a room, I can tell who's living and who's not based on what I see in my physical eyes and in my imagination. And so
Okay.
when I go into psychosis, the first signs are I start being able to connect with these spirits. And yes, I ran a whole business off of it where I could sit down to a stranger and like feel confident doing this, right?
Right.
But then what can happen is that because you're never really tuned into this reality in front of you, you're like tuned into others, you get sucked into it. That's what it feels like.
Okay.
So psychosis to me, what it looks like and feels like is waking
Because it
up.
can be so different for everyone. Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, it looked like waking up and then having a slideshow of images in my head constantly to where I couldn't focus on anything happening around me. I think I lost 35 pounds in, it was like around 40 days, because I couldn't eat. So my palms get really sweaty. They get to turn into rashes, and my eyes dilate. I talk really fast. It's just, it's hard for me to describe because I've never seen myself like that. I only know
Right.
from people telling me what it's like.
Right.
But the symptoms are very, very severe. The me that's talking here, it would not be present. It's like
Mm-hmm.
completely, this me is gone. Um,
Right.
and
Like something's taken over
that's what
pretty
it feels
much.
like.
Yeah.
It literally
Yeah.
feels like a possession to me. It literally
Right.
feels like that. And so
Oh,
I
I'm
hate to
sure.
say that, but it's like it feels like channeling. It feels like a possession. To me, psychosis feels like like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what other it feels like for other people because I don't have a big community of other people who are willing to talk about their psychosis
Right. Right.
currently.
It's very different for everyone.
And it's very different for
Yeah.
everyone. Yes,
Yeah.
and it's really understanding, and I don't believe healing is like a one size fits all. Like what worked well
Absolutely
for
not.
me might not work well for everyone else, but I do believe that like real healing requires a safe, supportive environment where the right tools are being delivered.
For sure.
So, I get on medication
Okay.
and I continue therapy. But this time I find therapy that changes my life. And this therapy is the one that gets me unstuck, not just with psychosis, but with bulimia, addiction, and everything else. It's a wormhole out.
Wow.
And so this healing modality, right, is called internal family systems or parts work therapy. And I'm not sure if you're
Okay.
familiar.
No, I'm actually not.
It's
Mm-mm.
phenomenal. But essentially, what I realized was, I got sick and I got on medication, and it gave me a second chance at life because I now had a brain that was clear and working for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
really, since I was a child, since I disconnected really young.
Right.
And I thought, like, what am I going to do now that my brain is working?
Right.
And you know what I mean? So,
So many possibilities.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
what I chose to do was first, I chose to love on my son. And I made sure all the trauma was healed from my mental illness and did all that therapy.
Right.
And then, I started focusing on creating change. And so
Perfect.
I realized that mental illness is often like a symptom of a broken system
Mm-hmm.
happening. And the internal family systems therapy that I was just mentioning is a way to put back the systems that are broken both inside of you and then like apply that externally.
Right.
So after I get this healing modality, I am able to create a system within sight of myself, right? Where I
Mm-hmm.
have what I call my leader, my manager person, my main personality.
Mm-hmm.
It manages the part of me that might get psychotic. So I do things like track my mood, track how much I eat, track my weight, track my symptoms because I need to make sure that I am keeping that part of me that's sick in health, right?
Right.
And so I created this system within this therapy, and
Mm-hmm.
really I have to credit one person to this because I was in psychosis and had no money to go to therapy, but the tools that this person had on their YouTube saved my life. And her name is Teal Swan. And she's
Oh, I love
controversial,
it.
but she saved my life. And I feel like if you are in my shoes, you will understand that she will save your life too. And I literally, like, I was laying in bed in psychosis trying to figure out what was happening with me because I couldn't afford a therapy. And so this system, this therapy changed my life because it taught me that oh, the part of me that was rebelling as a teen wasn't broken. It was trying to protect me. It was trying to get
Mm-hmm.
freedom, you know? So it
Right.
taught me how to work with these parts and manage these parts. And so then after I realized, like, okay, once I have this system inside of me that's healthy, I can create systems in other people and then systems externally that are healthy.
Would it be like learning how to deal with different external things, like basically anything that's going on in the world, your family? Like, did it teach you those type of things?
Absolutely. It taught me because what it does is it teaches you how to master your inner world. So the idea is called internal family systems therapy. This is the idea that we have internal copies of our family inside. So like I don't know if you've ever like been walking through, I don't know, I do this the other day. Like I was walking through my house and I painted my room purple. And my dad has like this very like luxurious perspective on design where like that creativeness would like never be allowed. And I walked into
Okay.
the room and I heard him in my inner voice say like, "Ooh, no one's going to want to buy this house with this purple room. Like change it." Right?
Right,
So that's just a
right.
silly example, but the idea is that we have copies of our parents, of those people who raised
Like
us.
generational traumas and all
Exactly.
the things.
So
Yes.
because we have copies of all of that inside of us, you have to do the inner work to those parts
Mm-hmm.
to go, and people might be able to relate to this more by understanding your inner critic or your inner child, right?
Okay.
Those are just
Right.
two parts. ISF takes it and parts works takes it to the next level and says, yes, you have your inner child, your inner critic. You also have your inner teen and a copy of your parents and your brother and your sister and society, and so you need to go through and figure out which beliefs are mine, which are were given to me, and that's what
Really have to break it down and process it
that's
all.
what this taught me to
Right.
do. And so, what it
Okay.
taught me to do was go to each part of me, right? And so, I could go to the parts of me that were sick and bulimic, and I could say, why are you doing this? What's happening? And although that sounds like how do I do that, right? It's really simple. This is how you do it, like in terms of if anyone wants to do this. When you're triggered or you're feeling upset, you can sit down and journal exactly what you're feeling. And you want to be completely unfiltered. Like you don't want
Right.
to hold back here. You want to be like,
Right.
if you are like, God, I'm acting like a 12-year-old, great. You want that.
Right.
And then when you're not triggered and you're feeling better, you go back to that letter or video if you're not into journaling, and you act like a friend or your son or your daughter sent it to you. And you ask yourself questions like what does it seem like they need to hear? Like what beliefs maybe are not right? You know, how can I help support them? And then the next step is you actually do that for yourself. And so
Okay.
what I would do is go to my bulimic self when I felt bulimic, right? When the eating
Mm-hmm.
disorder was starting to come up. And it was like, I
Right.
want to binge. I want to binge. I'm ready to eat all this food. I'm going to journal. I feel like I need to eat. Feels like I can't control anything. Da, 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 da. Right?
So
Whatever you're
truly
feeling.
exactly how you're feeling in that moment.
Exactly how you're feeling. I feel if even if you can get down to somatics in your body, I feel my heart racing. I
Mm-hmm.
feel my stomach, you know, whatever it is. You want to get as specific and raw as you can.
Okay.
Then, if you can't write yourself back, you can take it to a therapist and show the therapist this because oftentimes the parts of us that are creating symptoms like eating disorders are stuck in the past. And so
Yes.
they're needing help being re-raised essentially.
Right.
It's a
Right.
developmental trauma. And so
Yes.
yeah, and so you could also bring it to a therapist to help you decipher what you're needing when you're in that cycle of eating disorder, or if it's addiction, what do you feel before you go use, what's happening in your mind, what thoughts are happening. It's about instead of trying to separate the addict self from yourself, it's about bringing them together through these
Right.
parts. That's why it's internal family systems and parts work. It's all these parts coming together instead of being at war with each other on the inside.
Yes.
So people can
Yes.
think of it as like being Siamese twins, where like we're all in this one body, but our consciousness can kind of split into different perspectives or personalities or sub
Mm-hmm.
personalities in psychology.
Yeah.
And it's about going to all those Siamese twins and talking to them and seeing why they're at war and then trying to get them all on board with each other.
It's amazing.
And so when I did this for myself, I realized I had a lot of freedom. And I had a lot more mental freedom than the people around me because I felt confident in guiding myself and my mental health now. And
Okay.
so I now choose to focus my time on building systems that will work that I needed when I was younger.
Right.
So right now
So
I'm
did you have the absence of people, and I mean, it could be your parents or whoever was around you, where they didn't actually ask you why you were having these issues? Or was it just like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you
so
doing this?
as a teen, no one was close enough to know I had any of the issues.
Okay.
So the first
Because a
time,
lot of things were secretive.
yeah, everything was secret. Everything
Yeah.
was secret. Yeah, yeah. I just needed to keep it together for like social image. But on the
Okay.
inside, absolutely dying.
Right, right.
Absolutely dying. So yeah, I didn't I think maybe once when my aunt was visiting, she mentioned that it looked like there had been someone throwing up a lot in the toilet to my
Ooh.
mom, and my mom didn't like think of it as a red
Just
flag.
kind of blew
Yeah,
it
because
off.
she just
Yeah.
didn't, she's not, educated in mental health or anything.
Right,
So,
right.
but yeah, I think that was really the only person that maybe recognized any sort of, or was even close enough. I really was a teen on my own.
Wow.
Hmm.
So, like now, going through all this therapy, how you just like you basically use your systems when you have triggers or things that happen, or do you have other skills on how to avoid triggers and
Absolutely not. I never avoid triggers. So yes, thank you for asking. Because two things. I never avoid triggers. First of all, because I believe that triggers have important information to tell me. Usually, when I'm upset, it's for a reason. It might not be valid, right? I might be
right?
upset because I got a purple car instead of a black one. But also, I might be upset because someone just crossed a boundary. How am
Okay.
I going to know if that anger or that pain or that trigger is not trying to tell me something and guide me or protect me? It's a part of me speaking. So I see my emotions and my triggers as just a part of the system. My brain also helps me decipher, is that trigger a past trauma? Is it a current threat? Is it, there's different things that
Right.
help me, but I never turn away from triggers. I always go towards triggers. So that's
Just
something.
process it.
That's something important to know about me and my healing, is that I don't try to go away from them. I try to get better at handling them.
Okay.
And then I try to come up with systems that can handle these parts of myself.
Okay.
So, for example, I know that because of my diagnosis, well, I have so many diagnoses, I don't really know which one's right, but I know that my
Right.
symptoms could sometimes surface as depression, mania, or psychosis.
Okay.
So I have systems in place where, like, because I am providing mental health to other people, I see a provider once a week.
Right.
And I see a psychiatrist once a month, even though technically I've been stable for so long, I don't need to. I've been in
Right.
remission for
Right.
so long, but I do that as a system to help me keep myself in check, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
also, I have a system if I go into mania where I understand, okay, I can't take care of my son. My sister takes care of my son with my co parent. A whole system goes in place. So it's less about creating a system to like get rid of it and more about creating systems for how can I handle this part of me? Because for me, it's like this. It's like, even though people can't see my disability, if they could, it would be like me not having a leg. So I have to learn, how do I navigate this world with one leg, with my disability? And
Right.
even though you can't see it, I have to have systems in place just like someone would in a wheelchair or with one leg to get them through in life. And so,
Such an amazing way to look at it.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
I understand that about myself. And so, but what that's allowed me to do is really become a lot more limitless because I know my limits, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm outsourcing where I know I'm not good now. And
Right.
that reality is allowing me to create change in the world that I really want to see. So, like, the one thing that I'm really proud of is the past 2 years, I implemented a family therapy program in my hometown where I was born and raised, which is exactly what I needed, right?
Right.
And now children who are literally the little versions of me in the same systems that have been happening for generations and generations now at least have one new system that's working.
Oh, I'm
And
so happy for you.
yeah,
That's
and I
so
love
amazing.
that. And so now I want to create systems on a collective level.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm launching the Sarah Marie Collective, where I have different aspects of myself, my self mastery collective, my family collective, my education collective, which is exactly all the parts of me that create each system that I've created externally now. And so I just want to teach other people, like, how can you do that with what you're working with? Like, it doesn't matter what your symptoms are. It doesn't matter if you're physically having symptoms or mental symptoms. There's a way to overcome your limits once you see
Right.
them, you know?
You just have to learn them,
You
right?
have to
And
learn them.
recognize them. And now you had a pretty big following on social media. I
I
remember you
did.
telling me. And then things kind of happened, and everyone's like, oh, where'd
And I'm
Sarah go?
so glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because this was when I was working as a channel. That's when I had the
Okay.
social media following. And I would
Okay.
just literally get on live and channel for people in the chat. And I loved it. It was so much fun. But I understand now that that's like, can be a sign of mental illness. And so I choose not to do that anymore.
Right.
But at that time, there was a group of girls. Gosh, they see this. I love you guys so much. There was a group of girls I was mentoring when I went into psychosis the first time, and they sent me to the Scientology rehab. And
Okay.
so this group of people I disappeared from their life. They don't know what happened.
So they have no idea
So
where you are, what happened,
this
anything.
video is me explaining to them, like, I'm sorry for disappearing. All my following back then, no idea what happened, because when I went to that rehab, the rehab part of it was you had to go through social media. And because I was playing a mental chess game of trying to get out of there, I was not willing to go through like that level of social media. I had like thousands of messages, so I deleted my entire business
Okay.
as a requirement to get out of the rehab that I was in.
Wow. And what was your handle on there? Just so people know.
Um,
In case they've been looking for Sarah.
life coach Sarah Marie.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
it was under?
Life coach
Okay.
or Sarah Marie Global. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Are you
like
going to do another one under the same name or?
not the same name. It's Sarah Marie
Okay.
Collective now because
Collective, that's right.
yeah, because the tools will that I would use for that will go under the Self Mastery Collective.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Oh my gosh. It's so friggin' awesome.
I'm
All these
excited.
people, I hope that it does reach some of these people because they've been wondering like where you've been.
I know some of them, and one of them told me like a year ago that a group of people got together and like still have the group
Oh,
like going without me in
oh,
it. And so I
yeah,
would like love to get it back there.
yeah,
And be like, I'm sorry, because I feel so bad. And that's also what I want to say now is like, I'm stepping back out and trying to give tools to the world, but I
right.
also know that I'm a little bit limited, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the fact of sometimes I need to take weeks off because
Right.
of my mental health. And so I hope that the people, if they do resonate with my story and they do kind of like, I want to know how she did that and do that too. Like, I hope that they can accept me in all my parts and know that like I might not be like the best, most consistent creator because I
Right,
have mental
right.
health issues and that, but I am going to be delivering tools. And even on my website now, there'll be a free workbook. It's
Okay.
a safety plan workbook, which
Okay.
is a way that I um, prepare for crisis in my life, knowing that I have mental health issues. And it's just something that
If people don't still follow you and they don't respect you so much for being so raw and putting this all out there,
I'm
you don't want them to
terrified.
follow.
I'm so scared. I'm so scared. But you know what? The reason that I'm doing it is this. My current job that I have as a family therapist and implementing this system, I feel like when I went into that interview, I told them, like, I come from trauma. Like, I'm going to be a good therapist because I went through it, you know?
Right.
So I'm hoping that, like, the people around me that I need to, like, survive see my vulnerability as a way as a way for me, like, to grow systems to become better
Right.
rather than like going after systems that weren't working or targeting certain people in my
Right.
journey or story. I don't want that.
Right.
But what I do want is to highlight that, like, okay, systems, they need some change.
Right.
And there needs to be
Like
some
we have to
awareness.
do better.
Yeah, to get collectively, right? Like,
Right.
I'll lead
Right.
us, but like collectively, we have to do better,
Right.
And I'm hoping that like the people around me will support the fact that I am choosing to be so vulnerable with this, because at the end of the day, when I walk in, when I'm working as a school counselor and I walk into my one-on-one sessions with my teens in particular, and
Mm-hmm.
I connect with them, I think there was no one like me. Like, I want to just sit down and tell that teen, like, I know exactly what you're going through. Da 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 da. Therapy
Right.
doesn't allow me to do that. But if
Right.
I step on a public platform, I'm now showing other people who have mental illness, like, you can do this and still be successful and healthy and raise a kid. And I'm getting an EDS degree with almost a 4.0 after being in psychosis for years.
Ooh.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's just like,
Yeah.
it's like there's living, you can heal with the right tools. And
Right.
perhaps if you're not healing, it's because you're not around the right systems that are providing the right healing.
Right. Right. And you recognized everything, with going to therapy, you knew what was working, what wasn't, and you wanted to get better.
Oh,
So I think
totally.
that just makes such a big difference too. So if you were to talk to people, if you had like a message to say to people about everything that you've been through and what you're doing now, have at it. Say it right now.
Okay. Think about the hardest time in your life, and then think about what you needed at that time and become that. And then become it for other people.
Powerful.
That's what I would say.
So good.
Thank you.
I'm gonna make sure that we put all your links and everything in the description,
Okay, thank you.
and we'll just make sure Kenna has all that. And girl, I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I hope that the way that that story came out made sense, because it's very hard when you're missing times in your life.
It made perfect sense,
Okay,
and
good.
it will perfectly relate for so many people. Like, you did amazing.
Okay,
You
thanks.
even with the yes, you did
I'm like,
amazing.
sometimes my brain gets lost, but I'm like, I think I got across my story, at least the main parts. So, but
Right,
and
right,
at the end of the day, I'm not really here to even discuss my story. That's not even what I really care about. I care more about, like, let's discuss these systems that aren't working. Like,
right.
let's discuss how to make it better.
And the fact that you went through your own personal hell, and look at you now.
Yeah,
So
and
it's possible.
it's
It's
totally possible. Even
yes.
I'm not saying I'm always happy. Oh, believe me, there's days I'm on the ground crying.
Right.
But the
Right.
difference is I also am on the ground crying, saying, "Hey, this is gonna pass. This is just a moment. This is,
Right.
we're gonna get up." Like, I have resiliency now, and that
Yes.
that can be built like a muscle over time.
Absolutely. I'm so thankful for you.
I'm thankful for
Gosh,
you.
that was awesome. That was awesome.
Thank you for
And
having me.
what we can get on here more, down the road too, and talk about different things you're doing or any more advice you want to give people. I'm all for it.
I'd love that. Thank you so much for having me. It
Okay,
was
I
so
will.
much fun.
Yes, it was. Well, first one, you got it out of the way.
I know,
Yay.
yay, my story's out there. Now we wait for the wave.
Yeah, you're like, I just got to breathe now.
So,
All right, honey, I appreciate you, and
thanks.
we'll talk soon.
Okay, all right.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.